We are at 3.82 or bust. So for this, the end of the iteration 1 and the end of the sprint, we had a couple of main goals in mind. The first one was to sort of just fix and finish anything that we had begun working on, and that was from our sponsor. He desperately said, stop building new things and just make sure everything is working. So that was the first thing. The second thing was from sort of the feedback from Venkat was we felt our work request order form was very difficult to read and to use. User usability and just understanding how the workflow of the user and the user's experience was one of our main tasks. So first thing we did in this sprint is we completely rebuilt the work request as far as how it looks, and the first main thing was all of these fields were user input. Now they are drop-down input. So for some of them, they're still placeholders because we have to actually get what these inputs are from our sponsor. Like, we don't know what a request driver is, but so as Oscar is demonstrating, we can fill out the fields that still need to be filled out. And the second part on this that we fixed is we did the what is it called, the stepper?
Yes.
So the first step, if you scroll just a little bit, you can see is just for the enter the user information. The second step will automatically begin after the first step is finished, and that allows the user to build the task or multiple tasks for a single work request. So just right now we have standard placeholders, but those are all built into the back end. So once we adjust them, we don't have to actually go back and change any of the code. So just give them a second to put in these inputs. And as you scroll down, you can see we have the functionality. We can add multiple tasks, which will just basically replicate this step 2 over and over and over, or you can go back and delete. So once you don't hit next or next, yeah, it'll move on to step 3, which allows you to save it as a draft, submit it for approval, reset the entire thing, or to go back to step 2. So if you want to submit for approval, we have our work request submitted. Now that allows the user, it'll add it to a queue of work requests that need to be approved or denied. Right now we have it built in to our admin panel because the admins are the ones that are going to be deciding what can be approved and what can be denied. So that admin panel now takes you to our new queue of work requests. If you want to see we have a work request that was generated. This one has 3 tasks. If you click on it, it expands it. And if you click on the work request number, it'll take you to a work request view, which allows you to see a work request that was generated with all the different tasks attached to it. A lot of the functionality of the work request was built by Joe. If you want to talk about any of the...
So yeah, I guess one of our major things this sprint, we wanted to be able to present how we make the request to the backend and then be able to show it. And so the admin panel basically does that, like Tyler explained. So it just shows all the pending work requests, and then what the user does, he goes through each one and can click it, view the work order and the task, the number of tasks. Like, for example, the first one has 3, and then he can approve or deny with the button on the right, thumbs up, thumbs down type of thing. And yeah, and so this is just kind of like a query that we did for all the pending work requests. And then once those get approved, then it leaves this approved work request component, and then just goes to the next phase.
There's also the ability to filter based on...
Yeah, we're still working on the filter, but you can, we incorporated where you can, it basically filters the, so this query pulls 10 records at most. There's only 4 right now, and the filter actually queries those 10. But we're still working, since we make a request to the API to get each 10 fields, so when you go to the next page, it gets another 10 and another 10. The search query only searches the first 10 that you pull from the API. So we're still trying to incorporate how to do a search function that will search the data in the back end without bringing all the data forward, just for, yeah, so yeah.
So one of the biggest things that we wanted to do was for the user validation is make sure that things were actually being sent properly. The drop downs help a whole bunch with this, but there's still some things over here, like for example, like the duration. If you wanted to go ahead and set a duration of like, I don't know, just a string here. So you can't convert that to a number. And if you were to send it, you know, it would give you an error with sending that work request. We still haven't implemented the notifications on it, but if you look at the, give me 1 second. If you look at the network that was sent, network request that was sent, it'll actually bring up the error here. You know, it's like this was not, you know, the request is invalid for one because it's, sorry, it goes in order. So the first thing is the request is invalid. If you keep going, you know, it'll keep checking to make sure the field is actually filled in. But if you were to fill in the rest of the field, all the way up to like the, all the way to the charge code, or excuse me, to the duration, then it would also throw out an error. And this is something that we want to go ahead and incorporate because, you know, it's nice to have some visual feedback for the user, and that's we're going to do that on the next sprint. So. But yeah, so that's another thing that we're doing is basically we're gonna add on to the work request forms, the work request view, I'm sorry, so that you can see a couple of these things like the we're created at and the start, excuse me, the request. So yeah, so you can go ahead and see a couple of things that we're adding on there, like the actual time that we created it. There's a second ID that we're adding on there, and this is going to be used in the search functionality, so you can distinguish between work request IDs and task IDs. So this is all being automatically done in the back end. And the other thing that we did is actually improve our test coverage. So if you look at the back end now, it actually has a really high test coverage. So previously, I believe it was around like 70%, maybe high 60s. Now it's actually pretty close to 100. There's a couple of little small outliers here, but for the most part, all of the services and all their hooks are now being tested to make sure that they actually are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that's pretty much similar to what we're seeing for the front end. Which is it's running around like a 75% test coverage. A lot of the small things that aren't being covered are just like the getters and the setters, which should be very easy to go ahead and change on that. Let's see the tasks. But I guess it's, as Tyler had explained, a lot of these are going to be, the drop downs are now going to be populated automatically. Half of them are at this moment. So the biggest thing that we thought of for this is so the users can have, like, you know, if they wanted to add in, like if there's a new request or there's a new charge code that needs to be, that gets added to the back end, you know, this automatically becomes populated and they don't have to worry about the front end being updated. So we decoupled that a lot. We pretty much went ahead and got everything we wanted. I don't know if you can go a little bit lower on this part here, just like on this one here. Except the only thing was, I believe, the ability to add and attach items to our tasks. That is something that we're going to go ahead and push on to the next sprint. I believe it's the same thing for the front end and the back end, but for the most part, we got everything running that we wanted to, which was to create a collection, basically get the drop downs to work for the most part dynamically. So if you update the back end automatically, the front end will receive these updates, and make sure that the work requests can actually be created and viewed. And when the user's creating it, you know, it's not a tedious process that, you know, they're having to scroll down this really long form just to get it to work. They can actually compact it, and it's a lot easier and nicer to look at. That's pretty much it. I think that's it.
All right, thank you.